My name is Crystal. I am a disabled queer woman, and I'm here to have a talk with you today about what it's like being disabled in the United States and trying to keep a job. So, there's some major issues with how we as United States citizens and people in general deal with disability and how it relates to the job force and how we are treated as employees. Now, the Equal Employment Opportunities Act was a major step forward, as were similar things such as the, disability rights movement and the Americans with Disabilities Act, and even, the Affordable Care Act. Those have all had very positive effects on the disabled community as a whole in the United States, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. Now, disabilities are not just physical, they can be emotional or psychological, and they can also be intellectual. This means that you could see someone with a wheelchair or a missing limb, or someone who has Parkinson's disease, or someone who has dyslexia, or someone who has PTSD, someone who's missing an eye, someone who's deaf, blind. The list goes on, honestly. For me personally, I have been disabled for well over 15 years at this point. I've experienced over 15 years of abuse in my life, which has triggered post-traumatic stress disorder, DID, anxiety disorders, major reoccurring depression. I have trichotillomania, excoriation disorder. I also have physical disabilities as well. I have polycystic ovarian syndrome. I also have chronic pain and fatigue. I have hips that don't sit right and a back that doesn't like sitting straight. And I also have migraines that have gotten to the point where I'm having about a migraine every week or so, even with medication. And I'm going in for more treatment options with a neurologist to find out why they're happening. Now, I am a person who would benefit greatly from things like universal health care and universal basic income, because at the end of the day, I am a queer woman who is disabled and who is supporting a partner who is totally disabled as much as I can. And even just saying that could cost him his benefits. And that is heinous. We are not married. If disabled people marry and they have benefits, they can lose them entirely, legally, within the United States as it is today. I have a bachelor's degree that I got from the University of Louisville this spring during COVID. And while I am very happy that I finally achieved something that has been a goal 10 years in the making for a lot of reasons, it was horrible on my health, both mental and physical. As a student who is independent and was relying entirely on loans, aside from very few scholarships that did in no way cover the full cost of tuition. I worked a full-time job while being a full-time student at a call center, who violated my rights as a disabled person in a number of ways. And when I eventually left that job and applied for full-time disability benefits, which I was denied, by the way, they lied to the SSI department and said that I had never once filed accommodation letters to them, which is very untrue, as I had spoken with an HR director on multiple occasions. I had emailed them, I had spoken to them on the phone, I had had one-on-ones with supervisors about how the job was affecting my physical health as well as my emotional and mental health, and how it was worsening my disabilities. I had applied for short-term disability, which is something that in the United States is only offered by certain employers and is something that you have to pay into. There is no short-term disability department with the SSI. There is no way for an American citizen, currently as it stands, to have short-term disability to get some of their medical issues under control in the United States, unless if you have already paid in to a pool. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, what about, FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act? I applied for that, and they really don't like you using that for short-term disability, unless if it's something that was happened at the job or outside. So, for example, if you undergo an amputation, you might be someone who would qualify for FMLA. But for me, a person who is just dealing with further issues with my chronic disorders that are never going to go away. At this point, my issues are so deeply embedded that I will have to be on medication for the rest of my life to handle my disorders. And as with many people, as I age, I am as likely to get more disabilities on top of everything else. And the way that our economy, the way that our healthcare works right now, we don't accommodate or help or, just give disabled people a way to live and work without highly unfair and horrible ways of treating them. I have been gaslit by employers. I have had it very highly insinuated that I was lying about issues with my health just so I could go home and, be lazy. Or I've been told or implied by coworkers that I was lying about my disabilities. And there are all sorts of negative public stigma about people who lie about disorders so they can get benefits. And honestly, here's a newsflash for you. It's virtually impossible to get full-time SSI benefits if you're lying. I have friends who have disorders that can kill them before they turn 50, who are considered not disabled enough to qualify for SSI benefits. And these are people who are dealing with just horrible diseases that will kill them or just make it really impossible for them to ever work. Like physically, mentally, some intellectual disorders, there's no way they're going to be able to hold a full-time steady job. And, with the way that our economy works, part-time jobs don't cut it. Most people are working 2 to 3 jobs because our minimum wage isn't high enough. And if you're disabled, you spend so much money on taking care of yourself and spending days at home. And that's just part of being disabled. I don't like calling off of work. I don't like being drug into my supervisor's office to get, reprimanded for constantly having to call in or leave early. I don't like inconveniencing my coworkers either, because I know that makes it harder on them. But you know what also is harder on them? If I decide to power through a day, even when I'm feeling like garbage, and I make more mistakes, I will get less things done. I'll be worse off with my customer interactions. And there are days where I have worked through on 10, 12, even 13-hour shifts as a disabled person. And it has absolutely wrecked my health. I have been working for 10 years, and I've been a caretaker for even longer. And my ability to perform in a full-time job has drastically diminished in just 10 years of trying to support myself in the way our current economy works. And I've worked in a variety of different jobs. I've done physical labor jobs. I've worked in factories. I've worked in call centers. I've been a barista. I've been a cashier. I have been a bourbon steward. I have worked in healthcare and a variety of fields. I've worked in library science, which is what I'm hoping to get for my education goals. I want to be a librarian. I want to be someone who helps people with research and reference work and helps with their community. I love being engaged with my community. I love helping people. I like going to work. I do genuinely enjoy going to work. But when I have to keep working to a point that would make even, someone who's not disabled overly worked and would wreck their health, what do you think that does to those of us who have disabilities? Huh? Because I can promise you it's a lot worse than you initially think. And the accommodations that they offer at most jobs are a fucking joke. They really are. Most jobs aren't even accommodating for people in wheelchairs, for people with physical disabilities, and not to mention people who have hearing problems or who are blind. And don't get me started on psychological problems. We could have an entire separate discussion on that one. Because the way that workplace cultures work and the way that microaggressions with racism and all sorts of other factors like homophobia, transphobia, fat phobia, yes, that counts, okay? Because a lot of disabled people are just big. And you know what? A lot of them are also really skinny because their medical problem might be tied into that in ways that you can't understand either without a medical degree or without being disabled yourself and having to do research. Because at the end of the day, the people who are most educated about their own disabilities are often the disabled person themselves. Yes, doctors are very educated. Yes, they know a lot. But you know who also knows a lot about the disorder? The person who's fucking experiencing it. I have friends who have been dismissed by doctors for years, whose illnesses and issues have been completely mishandled and not at all treated by doctors because they wouldn't fucking listen to their patients. Okay? And that's not something that we should be proud about as a country. The way that we treat disabled people is horrible. And that's not even considering the problem with eugenics in this country, because there are a number of people who are very interested in the fact of creating designer babies or just aborting babies or, just throwing disabled people away until they die in a corner so you don't have to think about them. And that's a historical problem with this country. And it hasn't gone away. We haven't fixed it, and it's something we need to work on. But you know what? We're never going to be able to address those harder issues until we address the fact that working and having to hold multiple jobs just to be able to live for abled people, that's inexcusable. It's even worse when you're disabled. I can't tell you the number of times I have been almost homeless because my job had fired me because I had to call in too often, or I just had to leave a job because it was horribly wrecking my health. I've played yo-yo with all of my jobs for the past 3 years after I tried filing for a disability. And you know what? They told me no. They told me I'm too young. I can't possibly have the disorders that I have, or I'm just not disabled enough. And you know what? You can be disabled at any age. And that possibility only increases the older that you get, because the older you get, your systems start failing and you will be disabled at one point in your life. Period. Everyone will experience disability before they die in some way, shape, or form. So when we talk about disability rights, it's not just about me. It's not just about friends of mine who are being killed by our healthcare system and by our government and our economy every single day. It's also about you. So when I ask you to give a fuck about disabled people and work and listen to what we're asking you to do, this is about you too. Because one day you're going to be in our position, and you know what? It sucks, and no one should have to deal with this. We need healthcare reform. We need it very badly. And when I say that, it goes from everything to my own father, who has been insulin rationing and dealing with completely ludicrous insulin prices since before I was born. It goes to my mother, whose liver shut down because of black mold in a church my dad preached at. I watched her slowly die for a year because she refused to go to the hospital, because if she did and she got the care that could have saved her, it would have killed my father, because we wouldn't have been able to afford his insulin. And I'm not the only person who's had situations like this. There are elderly people all over our nation who are dealing with similar issues all day. There are people who are disabled. There are families of disabled people who are working to support people. Did you know that it's actually illegal for disabled people to marry and keep their benefits? Did you? Because I have a partner who's completely disabled, and even just saying that could completely wipe him of his benefits. That's not including issues with disability and, being queer. Because being queer complicates everything. I don't say that because it's fun and I get all the social benefits it brings, as Rosalarian would say. Because you know what? There really aren't any. I'm queer because I'm queer. I'm disabled because my body is a pain in the ass. And because I've gone through things that no one should have ever had to go through. And it has completely wrecked my mental health. And I've gotten so much better than I used to be. I used to be so much worse off and put up with stuff that was absolutely wrecking my mental health and my physical health. Because your mental health does a lot of stuff with your physical health that you might not be aware of, okay? The United States as a nation is literally working itself to death. And that doesn't just affect able-bodied people. It affects disabled people a lot worse. And you know what? I like working. I like living a lot better.